We'll be starting off Parshas Vayera, and that's going to be on page 100 exactly. But before we get there, just one little recap from last week. We had the story of Lech Lecha. Now, in the story of Lech Lecha, there was right at the end, you have Avram, you have his son, you have his children, well, only his one son, Yishmael, and Hashem commands them that you should give a bris to all of your household. And Avram gives himself a bris at the age of 99 years old, after which he gives a bris to Yishmael. I'd like to just show you on page 95. If we could look at this for a real quick second. On page 95, near the bottom. And right at the bottom, verse 25. Yishmael, his son, was 13 years old when the flesh of his foreskin was circumcised, and to his credit, Yishmael did not protest being circumcised. So we see that Yishmael at 13 years old, which is already considered a mature age. You're already halakhically considered an adult at that point. For some reason in America, you're considered an adult at 18. I don't know whether maybe people have got less mature over the generations. But you're considered an adult, you're considered as having your own opinions, and you have, halakhically, the legal freedom to choose whatever you want. You could say yes, you could say no. You're emancipated. So it's very interesting that Yishmael at 13 years old had a bris, which means it was by his own volition, it was by his own decision. He volunteered. As opposed to Yitzchak, we're going to see later in this parsha, that when Yitzchak was born, he had a bris at 8 days old. At 8 days old, you're a baby, and you have absolutely no opinion on what's going on, not even in the slightest. Even if you wanted to have opinion, you wouldn't be able to say anything. It's a tiny baby, a newborn. So it's very strange that we find that the sign, the covenant, the bris is supposed to be within the flesh of a person is a sign between them and Hashem. Why is that something that we look at as Jewish people, something special done at the age of 8 days old? Shouldn't we be more like Yishmael and say, hey, let's do it the older the better. Let's do it at a time when someone's mature, someone can appreciate it. Why don't we do this at a time when someone can choose to do it instead of having it done to them? Wouldn't entering into a pact, entering into a promise, entering into a connection with Hashem be so much more meaningful if we would do it at a time that we can understand it and we can live with it, we can appreciate it, and most importantly of all, that we can choose it. It's very strange that we say, the Muslims continue to do bris at 13. And Jewish people do it at 8 days old. And we see this as our sign between us and Hashem. We see the 8 days old as the most important thing. And the reason for that is, the reason we don't want to wait till you're 13, it's not like a side thing. It's not, well, maybe you don't want to at 13 and you shouldn't. It's because there's something much greater. It's something about being a Jew. You see, throughout history, the Jewish people, their connection to Hashem has been one that is above intellect. Let's explain. Let's step back for a second. You have many people who act with intellect. They act sensibly. They do what the mind dictates in the situation. Then you have people who act in a way that is not according to the dictates of the mind. They act in a way that doesn't make sense. You ever seen that? Someone who acts in a way that is not normal. There could be two options. You can either have someone acting above intellect or below intellect. Let me give you an example. You're walking down the street on a hot summer's day, and there are two people walking down the street near you. One of them is wearing a big overcoat and gloves and a big furry hat, and the other one also has a big overcoat and a black furry hat. One of these people could be a meshugana, someone who's crazy. On a scorching hot Florida day, they're walking down South Beach, Miami, with a massive overcoat because they're posh as meshuggah. They never realize that they're going to get heat stroke like this. They're out of their mind. They need medical help. Then that's called below intellect. You're walking down, t-shirt, you're comfortable, you have a white cap on to keep the sun out of your eyes. Makes sense. That's normal. That's a normal thing to do. Someone with a big overcoat is acting below intellect, not normal. Then you see the other guy. The next guy is a Hasidic man walking to shul. Big overcoat, big black hat, And is it hot? Yes. Is he sweating? Yes. But why is he doing what he's doing? Is he doing it because he doesn't have the mind, the intellect, the normalcy to realize that this isn't a smart way to dress today? No, quite the opposite. He realizes very well that the most logical way to dress today would be in short sleeves. But he decided to go above and beyond the norm, above and beyond what would make sense, and do something more than that because of his conviction, because of his ideals, because of what he believes in. This is called above intellect. This is called rising beyond what makes sense. There's what's sensible, and then there's what's above sensible. There's what's natural and what's supernatural. So the Jewish people, their connection with Hashem is one that's greater than the mind. In general, we find nowadays people who they say they believe. I don't want to get into the discussion of believing in science, seeing it's a very unscientific statement, but you find many people nowadays who they say everything in life has to make sense, has to be according to your intellect. The only problem is, intellectually speaking, the intellect is limited. Anyone who's a thinker realizes that their thinking is confided to their education, to their IQ, to their knowledge base, and most of all, to human limitations. And there must be, logically speaking, something greater than logic. That's a paradox within logic. Within logic, everything has to be logical, including the fact that there's something more than logic. So that's the Jewish people's connection to Hashem. When you look at someone like Ishmael, he did what made sense. He sat down at a mature age and he thought about it and he decided he wants to have a spiritual connection with Hashem. You look at Yitzchak and he went above and beyond. His connection with Hashem was from the first moment. It was not according to intellect, because his connection with Hashem is above the mind. It's above what makes sense. And therefore, when things don't make so much sense, when it's not convenient, when it's not a good situation to be connected to Hashem, the Jewish soul perseveres, because it's above the intellect. I'd like to say a very interesting story that goes as follows. It was in the mid-1800s in Russia. Where was Russia in the mid-1800s? It took off most of Eastern Europe. So where in Russia, whether it was Poland or Romania or Hungary, I'm not sure, but it was in Russia. And the Tsar, they would say, legend has it, he liked to dress up like one of the common folks. You know, go mingle, hear what people are saying, hear the murmurings. Maybe he was a little paranoid about revolution. So he went to a bar, and he's sitting in a bar, trying to overhear conversation, talking to people, and a group of soldiers walk in, and most of them are on their best behavior. One of the soldiers, he keeps ordering another drink, and another drink, and another drink, and this soldier is getting pretty drunk, so the Tsar sits down next to him and says, hey, you know, what's going on? Let's have a drink together. Tell me about yourself. The guy's like, yeah, I'm a Jewish soldier. I'm stationed in the base nearby. Oh, very nice. They're talking and talking. And the Tsar's like, why didn't you buy us another round? So the soldier's like, I'm out of cash. So the Tsar's like, figure it out. The soldier goes up to the bartender and says, hey, I'll give you a collateral or something. So the bartender looks at him and is like, what do you have that's worth something? So he pulls out his sword. not as a stick up, but as collateral. He says, hold on to this. I'll come tomorrow. I'll bring you the money. So, okay, I promise you, tomorrow, right after my shift on base, I'll get my sword back from you. Then he goes on drinking, and late in the wee hours of the morning, he goes back to his base. The Tsar, the first thing the next morning, announces he's making a surprise inspection of a nearby barracks. The soldiers start running, getting ready, preparing, polishing the shoes and sweeping the barracks. There's one Jewish soldier, he's missing his sword. You can't get on dress rehearsal without your sword. So he takes a piece of wood and he starts whittling. Remember the old Boy Scouts? He whittled there for hours. He's whittling away and he couldn't make the whole thing. He made a sword. He managed to figure it out. He made it. It looked nice. He stuck it in there. No one would notice, you know. Anyways, he's standing on parade. The Tsar's looking through the troops, acting as if he's looking at people at random. And as he walks through, the Tsar stops by the man before the Jewish soldier and shouts out, why are you looking at me like that? And the soldier is shocked, bewildered, frightened, doesn't know what to say. The Tsar says, you just gave me a bad look. And he turns to the Jewish soldier and says, pull out your sword and chop off his head. He knew quite well that this soldier did not have a sword, and he was going to prove it. He's going to catch him in the act right here and now. So the Jewish soldier looks up and he starts thinking quickly. And he says, Honorable Tsar, Your Excellency, who am I to judge the Tsar's decisions? But surely this man is not deserving of death. And I cannot decide this, but let God be my witness. If this man is not deserving of death, let my sword turn into wood. And he pulls out his sword and whacks the guy in the neck, and his sword's out of wood. Everyone was amazed, shocked, bewildered. And with that, the Tsar was very impressed that he was the only other one there who knew what happened. He was very impressed by this guy's quick thinking. Soon he kept an eye out. He let word be told that this soldier, that should keep an eye on him, send him to military school, training. Soon he was an officer. He worked his way up through the ranks. And eventually, he got very close to being a general. The only thing is, he's talking, the Tsar invites him in for a meeting, which will appoint you as a high-ranking general. And the Tsar says, well, a good soldier like you have everything it takes. And the Tsar is looking through his records, and then he says, 1 second, which religion were you again? The man says, well, I'm Jewish. Not practicing, but I'm Jewish. The Tsar says, well, that's a disgrace. You're Jewish, and I've been taking care of you all this time? That's it. Tomorrow, we're going to convert you, and then I'll make you the most famous, most powerful man in Russia. The soldier thinks, and he thinks, and he thinks, and he decides, okay, I'm going to do it. What choice do I have? The next day, in the wagon, on the way to the ceremony, he's riding the Tsar's very own coach. And they're crossing a bridge. And on the way there, the soldier's looking out of the water, and he's thinking to himself, I'm a Jew. I might have power. I might have riches. I might have honor. But what's it all worth if I'm giving away being a Jew? And he jumps out the window of the coach into the water and was never seen again. The Tsar looked outside and muttered one word, just fool. He said, he's a fool. The Tsar couldn't understand or comprehend why someone would do something as nonsensical as giving away money, riches, fame, everything, power, everything that was precious in the eyes of this industrial age leader. Everything precious in his life, this man gave away for the sake of religion, for the sake of conviction. Why would he do that? He never understood. The Jewish bond to Hashem is one above intellect. Is one that comes from the soul. Is one that, just like Yitzchak, whether it makes sense, whether it doesn't, it's not below making sense. It's not doing something because it's silly. It's doing something because your conviction is stronger than whatever the winds of the current climate, of the culture or politics or excitement or whatever it is in that day and age people are going after. The Jewish soul can overpower it. Which is why it's so important with Jewish education. You have some people who say that you raise a child and you'll think, okay, they'll be more religious, they'll be less religious. We'll figure it out when they're older. First, you should raise them, send them to a good school where they'll learn math and English. And then when they come to their bar mitzvah, we'll give them bar mitzvah lessons. We'll figure it out then. But really, the Jewish way should be like Yitzchak. From the youngest age, even before they really understand, a child should learn Torah Tziva Lanu Moshe. The Torah was given to us by Moshe. They should learn Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, because the Jewish bond is above and beyond that.